Hi, I'm Arthur, and when it comes to Space Marines, you could say I'm a bit of an aficionado at this point, or at least I like to pretend I am. They are the bread and butter of this channel, and are also the main reason for people to play Warhammer 40k. See, most people have at least one Space Marine army in their roster, and even further than that, some people, present company included, have multiple armies of different Space Marines depending on your fancy. So, where does that leave us? Well, we all have preferences, and we all have things we like, and I have always been a pretty vocal opponent towards how much I dislike the Blood Angels, but their successors are something I vibe with immensely. So with that in mind, the fucking Flesh Terrors, probably the coolest army in the Blood Angels roster. They are symbolically colored to show that even when edged with darkness, there is still the nobility of Sanguinius. It's really cute, but also they are just fun because they provide the most instant karma of any chapter in the setting. I remember in Brotherhood of the Snake, there is a scene where an Imperial noble is so incensed by an iron snake commandeering her vehicle to go and get some important task accomplished to stop some major calamity, she actually shoots him in the face with a digital laser. It doesn't kill him, he just promptly grumbles and then apologizes for the inconvenience again, and then steals the car. If this was a Flesh Terror, there wouldn't have been even time for her to escalate that much. If she even seemed like she was going to say no, they would fucking eat her. The Flesh Terrors are brutes, they are savages, and have one of the most interesting chapter masters in the history of the setting. See, most named Space Marines don't get a model. Almost no successor chapters get a model, even more so unless you're the Black Templars and one of the most fan-favorite chapters in the game. And even still, they tend to keep the named character shit to Forge World resin. But I think I can name only one chapter master that was a staple of the Games Workshop store page for a successor of Space Marines that was responsible for launching significant amounts of models for people to play. And that would be Pedro Cantor. Oh, and Gabriel Seth is a close second, I guess. Gabriel Seth, being the chapter master of the Flesh Terrors, is quite the important thing, if I'm being honest. He is a monster of a man who, for some reason, has a higher than room temperature IQ, which for a Flesh Terror is honestly a big deal. He is able to control himself, but it doesn't remove the fact that he personally adores going insane in the middle of combat and just ripping shit to pieces. But the man has standards, so he knows when to let off the leash and when not to. You can just tell by the looks of the dude's model what kind of person he is. Shaved head so nothing gets in the way, ultra pragmatic face, screaming in defiance while swinging a fuck-off giant eviscerator named Blood Reaver to rip everything apart within likely a 2-kilometer distance, because boy can he move. For tabletop nerds out there, he had a fun rule where he had 6 attacks, or you count the amount of enemy models within 3 inches of him, and that was his attacks characteristic for that turn, with his, giant fuck-off eviscerator named Blood Reaver. The man is a walking Beyblade, but outside of that, he is also a hero in the true sense of the word. See, the chapter masters prior to Gabriel Seth were, cuckoo bananas, to put it bluntly. But I suppose that comes with the territory of being a Flesh Terror, don't you know? See, the Flesh Terrors often had a problem of being deployed like traditional Space Marines while not being traditional Space Marines. And what do I mean by this? Well, they get sent into combat arenas to support Imperial Guard like any good Astartes should, and they do, for a little bit. Once the orcs are dead and the smoke is cleared, suddenly the Flesh Terror allies that dropped alongside you are now looking at you hungrily, and that's when the Flesh Terrors charge into the Imperial Guard and whoopsie a few dozen war crimes occur. Basically, they get so lost in their berserk rages that they lose control and genuinely will kill anything that isn't a Space Marine on sight until the red thirst leaves them. It wouldn't be much of a surprise for me to tell you that they had a bit of an issue of falling to the Black Rage more so than any other successor of the Blood Angels. So what does this all have to do with Gabriel Seth? Well, when he stepped up to be the chapter master, he did the ballsiest thing out there. See, the Flesh Terrors were so dangerously close to being marked for censure, and he realized that if he didn't change anything, they would burn out and die like dogs, not like the warriors of noble lineage. So, he put into action a plan to essentially direct the Flesh Terrors in spear point style strikes of inserting Marines in places where there were no civilians and nothing but enemies to murder. Kind of like how the Iron Hands like to fight with no sense of protecting civilians and just murdering everything until there's nothing left, but the Flesh Terrors do it out of necessity rather than preference. Gabriel Seth is a man who is beset on all sides with the monstrous nature that has overtaken his chapter and realized just how deep the problem runs. These problems run thick within the blood of the chapter itself. They are in fact a part of their soul at this point. Even Gabriel himself acknowledges that he enjoys and even feels pride at the level of brutality the Flesh Terrors can produce, so he doesn't want to diminish the level of violence. He just wants to make sure that his chapter dies a noble death instead of dying like literal wild animals put down for their own sake. He is a berserker, but he is also filled with the purity of Sanguinius's light. It's kind of interesting to see him interact with other characters that lead other chapters, or even other legions. He had some pretty choice words for the actions of Guilliman when Rabute wanted to add Primaris Marines to the Flesh Terrors. It was probably just two very carefully selected words I can almost 100% guarantee you were along the lines of "fuck off," followed by a few more violent words, but even with someone like Commander Dante, it's kind of interesting the dichotomy they share, because in essence, Dante is the exact opposite end of the Blood Angel spectrum that Gabriel is on. He is someone who in his own eyes has to be the peak of nobility, where Gabriel has to be the peak of savagery to gain the respect of everybody underneath him. So with Dante, he has buried the level of savagery so deep that most people don't think it exists inside of him, even foregoing the process of drinking blood, which is a staple of the Blood Angels. So whenever he interacts with Gabriel, it always is this give and take of them trying to see where the other links up and where one is willing to give on their sense of morals and principles. They are very much yin and yang personified, where both of them represent the same ideals, but the exact opposite way of going about them. Gabriel will break every rule possible if it meant his chapter would survive and remain a noble force for the Imperium, going so far in some regards to cause a pretty well-known fight to occur between him and Astaroth the Grim. You know, one of the Space Marines in the top 10 do not fuck with category Space Marines list, which, if you don't know the list, it's Space Marines that for some reason are supernaturally impossibly strong, and if you ever thought about fighting them, you'd probably just explode before even making the attempt. Astaroth the Grim is terrifyingly strong. He's up there with Mephiston, and Mephiston is so strong he is regularly considered Primarch tier. But little known fact, Gabriel is also on the top 10 list of Marines, so the fight was pretty decent. Gabriel lost, but Astaroth, recognizing his commitment to his chapter's protection, realized the honor and discipline inside of Seth. Basically realizing that there is the argument of what is necessarily by the books and legal isn't exactly what is right most times. It ended with Astaroth coming to attest for Gabriel's character during a trial for the Flesh Terrors, and it ended up with them not being excommunicated. Gabriel is a living buzzsaw, but there is a distinct difference between him and people who have actually given in to the rage of Sanguinius. See, there's another chapter that has actually been excommunicated from the Blood Angels. They are the Knights of Blood. Cool chapter, but they were so known for berserking rages and civilian casualties that they were in fact removed as loyal chapters because they could not be controlled or curtailed. In the Devastation of Baal, Gabriel interacts with the chapter master of the Knights of Blood, Centaur Jewel. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Devastation of Baal, and I've been pretty open about this, but the interactions between Seth and Jewel are definitely a highlight for the book, because you constantly have Seth's ideals being challenged, with him trying to reason with the idea that if he doesn't keep control of the Flesh Terrors, they will end up exactly like the Knights of Blood, which they were so bad that they weren't even allowed to go to the Arx Angelicus for the meeting of the chapters of the Blood during the Devastation. Gabriel has his morals questioned as the end results of a combat featuring the Knights of Blood is very much the same as a conflict featuring the Flesh Tearers. So what is different? And you'll be interested to find out that it's intent. It's a bit vague, so I might be extrapolating here, but it is implied that Gabriel desires to be, for lack of a better term, a good person at the end of the day. Now, he's still a berserking cannibal vampire monster human, but he wants to be a hero for the Imperium, and no matter what happens, there's still a flicker of good in the center of the Flesh Tearers. Where with the Knights of Blood, it is apathy. They just don't give a shit about civilian lives or the Imperium. They give a shit about their martial prowess, and that's about it. They see themselves as just berserking weapons, which I think is the most important aspect of Gabriel Seth, that he is a small lit match in a sea of black. He is still a hero through and through, berserker or not, and it's why he's one of my favorite chapter masters and favorite characters of the entire setting. Even if it is just him and he is the only character that is fighting for the betterment of his chapter's future, he is still fighting. And he could be the only good man amongst savages, and that would still make them still a chapter dedicated to the cause of good, at least for the Imperium's sake. I know there's the argument to be had that there are no good guys in the Imperium, and good guy is kind of a relative term, but he is still fighting for the downtrodden. He's fighting for the Imperium and trying to save worlds that are beset by things that you could probably have a better argument of being evil. Now, are the means of accomplishing this goal good? Definitely not. He eats people. Like, literally, the Flesh Tearers eat people. It's in the fucking name, guys. But it's all about intent at the end of the day when it comes to Space Marines. He's my favorite of all Blood Angels chapter masters, and there's a lot of good reasons for it. But I want to know what you think of Gabriel Seth. Do you think he's cool? Do you think he's not cool? Or just another berserking vampire to add to the bunch? Let me know in the comments. Alongside that, remember to like and subscribe as it helps the channel. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and if you want to support me as well as gain access to additional content, then become a channel member today. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.